Good evening, happy Friday, and welcome to Last Call, where we can drown the week's crap with whatever's on tap. And speaking of crap, we are going to try once again to clean up the mess that Warner Brothers keeps making of their DC franchise as we revisit our mental exercise of reimagining the DC universe. This time with our very special guest behind the bar, Chris Kent, the man behind the longest-running superhero RPG on Earth. I'm not sure if that implies that they've been running a longer superhero RPG up on the International Space Station or something, but there you have it. For those of us who have been following CK's content, it's clear he understands the source material and how to weave a compelling story. So be sure to subscribe to his channel, link in the description below. So top off your glasses, get comfortable, and let me know what you're sipping on in the chat. The Canarble Wagon rolls right now. Welcome, welcome. Good to see all of you. Boy, it's a chitty chat today. I'm so glad that you guys are here and having a great time. Let me bring in. Oh, let me mute her. There we go. Netter of Netters Network, how you doing, my dear? And what are you sipping on?
I am doing well, considering work has been incredibly crazy this week.
Yeah, it was nuts for me too.
Well, it's like I work for a company that does IT certifications,
Mm-hmm.
and our salespeople have been blowing up my my workload with different orders for me to get out, and it's been nuts. I'm barely keeping up. I mean, I managed to get out the last codes that were needed, like at 4:30, and I'm off at 4.
Yeah.
So that should tell you something. And I am sipping on. We're dubbing it a Netter Colada.
Yeah. What's in it?
It's pineapple juice and pineapple rum.
Good.
Robert Barr.
And I know because I poured it for you, so there we go. And this is the part of the chat where I up until we go live, I can type in the chat and welcome everybody, but I'm going to have to refrain until I can address you directly. Speaking of being direct, Agent Boomer, how you doing, my friend, and what you sipping on?
I got myself a Coca-Cola, and I'm doing all
right.
Oh,
the hard stuff for you tonight, my friend.
You know.
But is it the real sugar one, or is it the fake
Is it American or Mexican?
Yeah, it's from McDonald's.
Yeah.
Fry syrup, so like they had in the old days.
Yeah, but with high fructose corn syrup, like they didn't have in the old days.
Even at McDonald's, you don't get the no. Oh.
You really need the Mexican import in the glass bottles if you want the real sugar.
I like to get the Mexican import Fanta. That's pretty good too.
I hear you. That flavor is kind of a throwback to the 70s for me. But
Fanta.
I get you. Yep. And I am what am I drinking? Oh, it's off camera. It's cherry on top, cherry wine. It's sweet. It's nice. Netter likes it, but it's what I'm drinking tonight. Just for the heck of it, because I wanted to. So, salud. And speaking of good health, someone we hope has a great deal of good health, Chris Kent. Christopher Kent Sr. Let's be formal.
It's fine. You can call me whatever. Yeah.
Hey you.
Hey you. Just came in the bar. Cool. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. How are you guys? Thanks for having me on.
Just fine. I would ask what you're sipping on, but I know that you are trying to refrain tonight so as to save yourself trips to the little boys' room. You want to share why?
Long story short, my wife uses a wheelchair, and my landlord is installing a new shower, and he had kind of a forklift thing that he was moving it, and it fell off, and I was standing right there, so I caught it, and
like a superhero does.
Well, it's what Professor Geek calls aspirational, right? So at any rate, yeah. I very much aspire to be a superhero. So that was my superhero moment, but my back was not as heroic, So I'm just not getting around good tonight.
I understand. So yeah, limiting the trips to the little boys' room is probably a wise thing on your
So it
own.
was like that scene on that one Spider-Man cartoon we were watching where he had to lift the thing to save Gwen Stacy, but then he was sore for about a week, right?
Well, and we talked about so he's referencing that classic comic from I think that was the 80s. Maybe it was before that. Oh, it all blends together when you get to be a certain age. But
Yeah.
where Peter is literally holding far more weight than he ought to be able to hold up, and it's that superhero moment where he's prepared to die because he is going to sacrifice himself to save someone else, and they homage that in the what was it, Spectacular Spider-Man that we were watching?
Yeah, the cartoon Spectacular Spider-Man. Yep.
That we were doing an analysis of over on Mr. Matchstick's channel, and I was like, this was what I loved the most about that series is how much it honored the source material, which is going to be a theme for tonight. We will get to that shortly, but I want to welcome everyone to the pub tonight. Starting with Tim Hayes, who may not be here any longer, but he was first up. He has a baby shower to go to, and God bless. Salud, and I hope you have a lot of fun, and honor the mom, and I hope you have a good time. But then that brings us to Big Al of Big Al Presents. Don't worry about it, Al. We took a nap too, so it's what you do, so you could do the late night stream. So that's fair. And here's that longest running superhero RPG on Earth in the chat. Welcome. Let's see who else we got here. We got the beautiful Netter of Netter's Network, whom I already said hi to, but I love you too, sweetie. Pacific 4014 cannot stick around, but I saw he already shared out the stream, which I hope everyone else will tonight. That would encourage me a great deal. And speaking of encouragement, Matanui, who always encourages me when he comes by the stream. Thank you so much for being here. And another Lady Mist, dropping the little emojis to encourage everybody. So sweet. And Deleted Scenes, we love seeing you, but you're bringing us some sad news. Apparently, a son of a red shirt has passed away. And if you want to click the link that he has dropped for us, you can get the details there. It's sad, but thanks for letting us know. It hurts when somebody in our community leaves us, but that is life. Isn't it logical? Logical Spock. Thanks for being here, my friend. It's good to see you. And, of course, always an honor. Chapla, Admiral Evelyn Hampton. And, who's this derelict? Aged Boomer. Okay, he's here too. Final Fantasy fan 012. Good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Sir Torrin Clegane, I am glad you stopped by. I was thinking about you earlier today. In about 2 weeks, I am planning a stream based on I don't remember if it was a recommendation from Boomer or if I just mentioned it and he reminded me. But I want to do a stream dedicated to the Broadway musical Chess with the famous release song One Night in Bangkok. So I'm wondering, Sir Torrin, as our resident subject matter expert on Broadway, if you would be interested in joining us that night. Let me know. That would be in 2 weeks. That would be the 19th. Let me know. Leia Rose, hello. Welcome to the stream. So good to see you. Let's see. And Leia is drinking water. That's fair. That is absolutely fair. Let's see. And I think... Nope. Gap After Dark. Hey, Troy, Netter, Leia Rose. Deleted Scenes, Lady Mist. Panel and chat. Thank you so much. You're very, very encouraging. I was just talking with Pops about you earlier today. You're good people. It was all good talk.
Did you get the lovely Sherry?
I was just about to click on the lovely Sherry. Hello, Troy Pacelli, Agent Boomer, Game Master, and Netter of Netter's Network. Yeah, That's a... Yep. Thank you so much for being here. The lovely Sherry truly is lovely. She has the greatest thumbnails because they're her beautiful face. But she is lovely not because of what she looks like, because of who she is. She is a lovely, lovely person. And I think... yeah, Big Al's back. So good. See how long you can hang out with us, buddy. Yeah, and lovely Sherry saying a few good words about Son of a Red Shirt. Always a sweetheart. Yep, absolutely. Well, I hope that one day when I move along, I hope people will have nice things to say about me too. And I fully expect that Ryan Rogerathe will have a nice little in remembrance of me when the time comes. He
This is
promised
getting
he
so
would.
depressing.
It is. But that's life. Every life ends in death, except sometimes in comics, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, so tonight we want to talk about and Chris, I know we chatted in the background. Oh, just under the wire. I was just about to get started, but you haven't missed anything yet. Jedi Bill, welcome. So good to see you, my friend. Oh, Jedi Bill, if you're not subscribed to him, you're missing out. He's got a great karaoke stream. He does some great rewatches. And he's just good people. So make sure you're subscribed to him. And actually, everybody that Deleted Scenes is dropping the links for, make sure you right-click on them. Subscribe to their channels because they're all great content people. And even if they're not putting out content, even a couple people here that don't really do the YouTubes except to just stop in and say hi in the chats, subscribe to them too because we're building community here, right? Right. So anyway, I know we talked in the background, Chris, talking about what you do on your channel, and one of the topics that I do here is reimagine. Okay, so I got to start out all of these DC, reimagining streams with my little soapbox, right? Warner Brothers has owned DC Comics for decades. Back before Christopher Reeve was Superman, Warner Brothers owned them. So every DC film, whether it was Christopher Reeve's Superman, whether it was the Tim Burton Batman, all of them are copyright Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers made the movies, they made the TV shows, they distributed them. They were never licensed to anybody but Warner Brothers. So at any time, Warner Brothers could have done a Justice League movie. They could have had crossover films. They could have, just made a nod to other stories. They never did it. Meanwhile, Marvel created their own Marvel Studios after having the comic book company had licensed out their properties to all the other big companies, Universal and Sony and all of them. They all had the rights all over the place with different TV shows, different movies, different whatever, all over the place. So when they finally formed Marvel Studios, they didn't even have the rights to the film to do the films of their own properties for the longest time. Even after they went into bankruptcy, reformed, and were bought by Disney, Disney still, to this day, still doesn't own the filming rights to... I think there's still a question about things related to the Hulk. I think the Hulk standalone is not allowed, but they could do She-Hulk and other things like that. And they don't have Spider-Man and all the Spider-Man related characters. Those are all at Sony.
It's a lot, too.
Yeah. And it's like... And we've had like 4 or 5 aborted attempts at a cinematic or live action universe from Warner Brothers, and they still can't get it right. So this all started with me thinking, well, where it kind of started for me, or I saw the potential for it to start for me, and it never did, was with Smallville. Smallville, started out with it was Clark Kent, right?
In high school.
He must be the cornerstone of anything DC. That's what Superman is. And as the show went on, maybe significantly longer than it ought to have, they started to introduce other characters from the DC universe. And I was like, hey, this is something. I thought, and I think they thought too, that they would use this as these episodes that they were introduced in as backdoor pilots, and you get a spin-off for Green Arrow and some of the others. And They never did, because they went through what I used to call their peas and carrots era. And by that I mean they had OCD and they would not allow their peas and carrots to touch on their plate. You know, you ever know someone like that?
Right.
And if there was a pea in the carrots, they had to pick it out before they could eat it, you know? And that's how Warner Brothers was for so long. And you could even see it in Smallville, because they wanted to use this villain or that villain or this superhero character. And they were told, no, you can't use Bruce Wayne because he's being used by Christopher Nolan. So we go, okay, well, I guess we'll use Green Arrow then, you know.
Well, for the first 4 seasons, they weren't allowed to use Superman villains, remember?
Mm-hmm. And they would make up their freak of the week, and you were like, that is clearly supposed to be such and such villain. But they're not allowed to use that villain. And we have seen that throughout the DC cartoons and live action and all this kind of stuff, where you know they want to tell a certain story that the fans want to see, but they can't because they don't have the rights. And it's like, that's bullshit. Warner Brothers can do whatever the hell they want. They could say, you know what, Christopher Nolan, these are our characters. Yes, you can use them, but we are also using them on Smallville. You don't like it? There's the door. Bye. But they never did that. They never did that.
Well, they didn't follow up with things, too. Remember they introduced Blue Beetle and Booster Gold in the last season? I thought they were going to get their own show, and then it just didn't happen. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is when they finally did do a Green Arrow series, it wasn't even a spin-off from Smallville. It was a completely different Green Arrow. So it's like, and that's where I stepped off. I'm like, I'm done. So everybody has been bellyaching and complaining about the CW and how woke it was and how ridiculous it was and stupid. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I never even got into it. I don't even know what the hell you guys were all talking about, because it wasn't, I wasn't going to invest again in the same characters over. I was done. So I walked away from it. And when it all fell apart, I'm like, I don't care. And then they did the exact same thing with the Snyderverse. And now it looks like they're doing it all over again with Gunn and whatnot.
The Gunverse.
Hey, it could be great. It could be wonderful, but I am not coming back until they earn me back. And then over the past year or so, I'm hanging out. What people ask me, what movies you watch and what TV shows. I'm not really watching any of that. I'm spending all my time on YouTube, consuming content created by independent people. And I come across a channel that kind of really speaks to my heart. It's this role-playing guy. He's running a game, and he's putting out his story on YouTube of the games he's been playing over the years. And I'm like, hey, he kind of sounds like me. I've got some great stories about role-playing games I've done. And I start following, and as I'm listening to his stories, it's like, this guy put his stories together the way I would have if I was dungeon mastering. If I was game mastering a superhero role-playing game back in the day, I'd be drawing directly from the comic books of the day. Clearly, this is someone who knows his stuff. And that person, of course, that I'm talking about is right here, Christopher Kent, Sr., of the longest-running DC superhero, longest-running superhero role-playing game on Earth. And I have no reason to dispute that. It may be. How far back does it go, Chris?
Hold on, let me see if I can get that. This is the trophy from Gen Con.
Wow!
Look at that.
1985.
Sorry, it's like a mirror thing. The way they worded it made it sound like it stopped in 2020. That's just the year I got the trophy.
Right, that makes sense. But, so it goes back to 85.
Well, yeah, 1985. Yeah.
So that tells me that, you were there for the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and essentially the reboot of the DC universe.
No, actually, I didn't know anything about it because,
really?
Well, ironically, I don't want to say we grew up in the same town or whatever, but we've spent a lot of time in the same town, as it turns out, right? You and me.
Yeah.
And out of curiosity, did you buy comic books then? And if so, where were you finding them?
Okay.
I could never find comic books before Batman 89.
Interesting. So I lived in Brookfield, Illinois. So most people that are semi-local and even people that aren't local that are just, animal enthusiasts know Brookfield for the very well-regarded Brookfield Zoo. It's one of the few zoos that still has a dolphin show and a huge primate enclosure and whatnot. It's actually a really, really good. I think it's like Brookfield and the San Diego Zoo are like the two biggest in the country, I believe. Anyway, so I grew up in Brookfield, and right at the train stop in Brookfield, there was a little strip mall. On one side of the street, it was a Cock Robin ice cream. That was fairly regional, so I don't know how many people remember Cock Robin, but it was.
I've never heard it. Yeah.
It was their claim to fame was that when you get your ice cream cones, they were square shaped. They were shaped like big cubes instead of big rounded scoops, and
Interesting.
they'd pile them like a pyramid, and it was really cool. They were doing the frozen bananas dipped in chocolate and the ice cream sandwiches made fresh and stuff long before a lot of these other ice cream places were doing that. Anyway, so on the one side was the ice cream place. Next to it was this little record store. That was where I first got my Star Wars rings, with Darth Vader and C-3PO on them. Next to that was Jake's Bar, which I thought was the coolest place. Turns out they were running a brothel out of the back, and I thought it was an even cooler place then. But the other side of the street, there was a convenience store. And next to that was Valentine's Comics, and I used to. That was my first comic book store, and they had the every Wednesday I'd go in and get whatever titles I told him about, and he was really good. He was like he knew what people read, so if I was subscribing to like all the Superman titles, if something else came out like a miniseries or something, he'd put it aside. And you'd go through and you'd be, oh, what's this? He goes, you don't have to get that if you don't want it. I just thought you might. And that's how I ended up getting some of the titles that I did, like Superman The Lost Years, a 6-issue miniseries that takes place between high school in Smallville and going to work at the Daily Planet, his years in college. So anyway. But, real quick, I'm kind of been...
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just going to bring up a few chats. Go ahead.
I was thinking of Mansfield, and what I was going to say is before Batman '89 and Mansfield, I never saw a comic book for sale anywhere.
We have yet to figure out Cock Robin. See, I didn't. So when it came to comics so now I forgot. Yeah, you're near Mansfield. Real quick, I know that Deleted Scenes is like 15 away from his goal in subscribers. So if you are new to the channel and haven't subscribed to Deleted Scenes, please go give him a sub. Help him get over that little hump. And real quick, I want to say hi to PJ of Orville Nation. Haven't seen you in a while, my friend. It is so good to see you. Welcome. He is much missed on Twitter, but we love him so much. He is the one who inspired us with Together We Grow. That has really been a core of our community. So Mansfield, Ohio. So I grew up in the Chicago area, specifically in Brookfield, Illinois. And every summer I would go spend the summer at my uncle's marina in Mansfield, Ohio.
Right.
He ran, his uncle, Uncle Bob, he went by Doc Sawyer because it was Bob Sawyer. He had purchased this marina when my uncle was young, and so it was a family business for many years. After it had changed hands to Uncle Bob's kids, my cousin Linda, they owned it for many years. There was this terrible fire. I lost my cousin in that one.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
It's a story I should really tell sometime on because it's just an interesting story. The kids were in the basement and playing, putting a fire in the fireplace, and they were unsupervised, and the fire started, and one of the kids got out and the other one didn't. And my uncle, who was working at the marina at the time, showed up and went in after her, and like 4 firemen were trying to hold him back, and he'd have dragged them in if they hadn't let go of him. And he went in after her and pulled out her body, and his hands and feet were just horribly burned.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And Nanette and I still go and put flowers at the grave. And just last year, when my brother passed, we went to the cemetery for that, and we went over by that side of the family, and we didn't know they had put up pictures of everyone, and I hadn't seen Kimmy, God, since the year she died, and it was rough. And my uncle still can't go and look at those pictures. He still can't. But anyway, so when they rebuilt the marina, this had to have been in the 70s, early 70s. My uncle and his cousin Frank, son of Doc Sawyer, bought it because Linda and her husband just didn't want to be there anymore for obvious reasons.
Well, sure.
So they bought it, and my uncle ran it. Frank was kind of the silent partner. You know, he was there. He did some business out of there, but he was kind of the silent partner. He ended up running for and served for many years in the House of the Ohio House of Representatives. Yeah, Democrat. You know, that side of the family is all Democrats, but it's like, that's okay. I love them anyway. But so I'd spend my summers there. And with my grandmother actually lived in the housing behind attached to the marina. And on Wednesdays, my grandmother and grandfather worked at the marina. My grandmother would work at the lunch counter. She basically ran the lunch counter. And my grandfather worked down at the bait shop, and the ship rentals, and he'd pump the gas at the dock and whatnot. And on Wednesdays, they got their day off, so I would go out with Grandma, and she'd go get her hair done in the morning, and she would buy me. You see, this story goes all over the place. I'm bringing it back to the point, folks. Really am. While she was getting her hair done, or before she'd go in to get her appointment, she would take me next door. She would buy me a sweet roll and a comic book. That's when I got my first comic book.
Where's that at?
It was downtown Mansfield, but it wasn't a comic book store. It was like a convenience store. So we were basically buying them off the magazine rack, and there was no guarantees of what I was going to get. It's not like in a comic book store where they got everything, and you could say put aside, this one and this one and this one. I would get whatever I saw that was interesting, and at the time, what it was for me was they had just introduced, and I think it was like issue 7, it was like issue 7 of The Daring New Adventures of Supergirl, okay? And this was Supergirl had been, throughout the 60s and 70s. She had been an add-on character in Superman, and then there was Superman Family, and
so is this like 1980 roughly?
coming up on 1980. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. Then, yeah.
This is before Crisis on Infinite Earths, before the
Right.
Supergirl movie, any of that kind of stuff. But it was her
Right.
last standalone Supergirl, and that
Right.
that was kind of my entryway, and it was mostly because the covers, right? You'd see these
Sure.
villains, and I wasn't completely oblivious. I had gotten like some reprints, not some actual Superman comics, but like there was a reprint of the World of Krypton, and it came in like a pulp novel size. Yeah, I had that.
Yeah, I'm very familiar. Yeah,
and I knew all the trivia about Krypton and all that. I had the big comics. Well, you can't even see it. It'd be off the screen.
Right,
the
right.
World.
Right.
What was it? The Fortress
I can't
of
remember what
Solitude.
they're called now.
The big Fortress of Solitude, and the Superman versus Muhammad Ali, which was a great cover because in the audience of, I think it was supposed to be like Madison Square Garden or whatever, and all the audience, if you look real close, you could see like some of the artists from DC Comics.
Yeah.
Some of the stars of the day, like Sonny and Cher.
Treasury Edition.
Yes,
Treasury
yes.
Edition. Yeah, that's what it's called. Yeah. I was just going to say, one of the first comic books I ever had, we got it at a drugstore. And it was weird because they didn't normally have comic books, but Superman 2 was in theaters. And that was one of the first movies I ever saw in the theater, And so at any rate, they had made an adaptation of the movie, but using the designs from the comic books. And I believe the artist was Jose Luis Garcia Lopez.
Yes.
Who went on to do the famous 1982 model sheets. That's, to this day, if you go in like Spencer Gifts or something and you buy like a coffee mug or something, it's probably his art. In my opinion, he's the definitive look of DC.
Well,
they had. I was just gonna say they had like Zod, Don, and Ursa, but then they're done like in his style. So Zod's like clean shaven with like the Nazi hat on and stuff.
Yep.
As a kid, I loved it. I remember it was huge, but I'm like, why does he look so weird? I just didn't get it at the time. Yeah.
So, real quick, want to say hi to Connie Cleary thanks for stopping by. So, Lopez, he did a series in the early 80s of sketches that were meant to be the standard. This is what the costumes look like. This is what it was, all the artists were kind of supposed to follow it. And that artwork ended up working its way into the DC Heroes role-playing game. And it was also on all of the branding for the Superpowers collection, the action figures. And so for a comic book fan, that was the standard, right? You everybody loves Kirby and everyone loves, all the other artists throughout the years, but it was like one of the first times that there was like, just like in film, it's like you have these reference photos so that you keep your consistency. That's what this was for the comics, and so that's really what shaped the zeitgeist for these characters. And I noticed the same thing that you did, Chris, where if you went and you read every Superman movie had its DC Comics adaptation. And it was very clear to any comic book reader at the time that this was clearly meant to be a separate continuity. It didn't fit with the cartoon or with the comic books exactly. But it was nice to see that comic book style. So in your mind, you could kind of imagine, you know. And then it was like in the 90s and early 2000s where some of the artists who were so inspired by Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder and whatnot started to draw them clearly inspired by those actors, you know. So it's like, okay, I see what you're doing there. And then
yeah,
like
a lot of John Byrne.
Yeah.
I was gonna say a lot of John Byrne's work on Man of Steel. Certain angles he draws his Superman at looks sort of like, it'll have like Christopher Reeve's nose or something. Yeah.
So yeah, you bring up John Byrne. John Byrne comes. So we got to step back one more time to Crisis on Infinite Earths. You didn't know about it at the time, but by this point, I understand. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say everything I learned from like Super Friends. You know, like I was learning everything through cartoons because there was just no place to buy comic books. I still love that. To me, that is much more definitive DC than a lot of other things that are really well accepted.
Chris, did you
you know,
in the 70s, did you own any of the Mego action figures?
Yeah, actually, I recently just got them for my birthday. Again, because Walmart has them. I had Batman and Robin and Superman, and I think that might have been it. So my wife picked up Batman and Superman for me for my birthday.
Yeah. I actually at the time had all of them, and at the time Mego had the license for both DC and Marvel. So that was you haven't seen that since, but no, the Mego figures, sweetheart. I'm talking about Mego here.
You want
yes,
both of these?
yes.
They're kind of like Barbie dolls almost, not quite as tall, wearing fabric costumes. Yeah.
So I have been working on my custom Mego action figure.
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah, I painted that myself.
Looks a lot like them.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And I've had to pretty much assemble the costume myself, but of course we've got the yellow S, so we know that's and I haven't gotten the logo on yet, but I will soon.
Well, make sure it's like cellophane and he can throw it.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Right.
You got to be able to tear it off and throw it like a net.
Are you going to make a Gene Hackman Lex Luthor to go with it?
I am thinking about it, yes. And let's see if you can see. Whoops.
That's very cool. I like that.
Yep. And yeah, I've even got in here. I've got the hat. I've got the overcoat and whatnot. Yeah, that's all custom work. But yeah, to look like it really does look like Christopher Reeve, because that is my Superman. But so anyway, I although I didn't own a lot of the comics from the 60s and 70s, I did know all the concepts of the multiverse, Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth X, Earth S, all of that kind of stuff. And so when Crisis on Infinite Earths came up, this was the first time they were doing this big multi-title crossover story, and they started it more than a year in advance with little Easter eggs and you know, little panels at the end of comics that were like, you know, teasers leading up to it. And then you had this big event where all the characters come together to fight this big multiversal, you know, whatever. And so many of the universes were destroyed, and it was very clear they were getting rid of these you know, rarely used or rarely referenced universes, and just eliminating them. Then they were down to 5 universes that they all combined down into one, and then they rebooted history with a 2-part prestige format called the I think it was called like the History of the DC Universe or something like that. And it just kind of gave this narrative that kind of streamlined the whole history. And yeah, there was still some weird square pegs they were trying to put in a round hole, like trying to explain how Power Girl from Earth 2, who was Superman's cousin on that she's basically Supergirl of that universe, exists in this universe, but she is not Superman's cousin and all this kind of stuff. But
that's one reason I'm not super into reboots. Or I feel like the more we get away from the original, the more things get tangled up, and So that stuff drives me nuts.
And for the most part, that was a thing where they should have left well enough alone. The things that they did like Batman came out of it almost completely unscathed. His origin and history and all of that pretty much didn't change. But Wonder Woman, who died during the crisis, got her origin completely rebooted in the 80s with George Perez and Marv Wolfman, and her story changes to, instead of having been in World War II and all that kind of stuff, she's first time coming to man's world in the modern day, which was a great jumping on point for a lot of people, and they used it as an opportunity to reintroduce all of her lore, but in a modern setting. They did the same thing with Superman, except he didn't die in the crisis. They just wrapped up his story and then brought in a freelancer by the name of John Byrne to kind of reimagine. But whereas Wonder Woman is coming in the modern day, he's going back and retroactively telling his story. So he did these mini-series, The World of Krypton, The World of Smallville, and The World of Metropolis, to get you up to speed to the modern day.
I have a big John Byrne story when you're ready.
Yeah, no, I'm ready. That was the pivot.
Okay. So for me, the first time we had a comic book store was when the 1989 Batman movie hit. And I feel like if you're too young, if you weren't around, it's really hard to understand how insanely popular Batman was that summer. I remember going to the Columbus Zoo with a friend, and literally every kid and every teenager at the zoo that day. And it's like, by the way, there was a big drought that year, and it was like insanely hot. It was like 105 degrees or something that day, right? Yeah. Every single kid is wearing the black T-shirt with the yellow oval. You know, every single one is just sweating buckets. But man, they're just so excited, And you on the drive down on the radio, you'd hear Prince's Bat Dance about a dozen times before you got to the zoo, And so all of a sudden, at least where I lived, which is the middle of nowhere, there were comic book stores just every town now had a comic book store, right? And so there was one in Worcester that I used to go to called the Collection Connection, owned by a guy named Wayne Birch. Who was actually the second game master for our game. But at any rate, he had John Byrne's run of She-Hulk. And as a 13-year-old boy or whatever, She-Hulk got my attention, right? I was like, hey, I kind of like what I'm seeing here. I kind of want all of this, And so when you get to the mid-'90s, and I had been running the game at that point, and I wanted to share the story with people. And so I thought, well, I'll become a comic book artist. And so I'll go to art school, And I was going to art school, and I was working at a Walmart part-time in the portrait studio, taking pictures of families for Christmas cards and all that jazz.
Sure.
And at any rate, a guy who went to art school with me and talked me into working there with him, he got back from Mid-Ohio Comic Book Con that day. And I said, is there anything cool down there? And he said, yeah, John Byrne's there. And I'm like, oh, the She-Hulk guy. Which is, I don't think how nobody else would have thought that, right? But to me, it's oh, the She-Hulk guy. I would love to meet I've never met anybody famous at that point. Yeah. And so I had him cover my shift so I could get in my car and speed down just as they were closing, right?
Ooh, yeah.
And I go in, and I remember running into James O'Barr, who made The Crow. Mm-hmm. He was there, and I had no idea who he was. And I was like, hey, dude, which one of these guys is John Byrne? And he points him out. And I was like, thanks. And I go running up to him. And by the way, I'm kind of old and fat and stuff now, but I used to play football and everything. So I'm like 6'4", 300 pounds, sprinting right at John Byrne. And so John Byrne is just like, well, I don't know what I think of this. And so I get up there to him, and I've got like it's kind of like a suitcase, but it's just huge. It's like 4 feet wide and 2.5, 3 feet tall, whatever. Everybody in art school had them, and it's full of all your stuff you've been working on. And so I got all these drawings and stuff for my game. And so I'm like, oh, are you John Byrne? And he's like, yeah. I was like, oh, dude, I'm so excited to meet you. You know, my name is Chris. I'm wanting to be a comic book artist. I love your work. I would love it if you would take a look at my stuff and maybe give me some pointers. And he says, yeah, be a plumber. He's like, comic books suck. It's cutthroat. Everybody is awful. Don't do it. Yep. And he's like, don't do it. Do something else. And I was like, well, surely you don't mean that. And he's like, no, yeah, I do. I mean it. And I was like, okay. And as I'm talking to him, my peripheral vision starts closing in on me. And I realize I am so excited and nervous and everything that I'm ready to pass out. And so I tell him, I said, I've never been anybody famous before. I think I'm going to pass out now. And he's like, are you serious? And mind you, if you're familiar with John Byrne at all, if someone tells him, I'm so into you, I'm going to lose consciousness, John Byrne loves me, right? Yeah, that's like ideal for John Byrne. And so he's like, oh my God, sit down. So I sit down and I don't pass out. Like it comes in and then it's kind of like slowly going out. He gives me his bottle of water and he says, is it okay if I look through your art portfolio? And I said, yeah, that's why I'm here. So he starts going through it. And the first thing he sees is I'm drawing Superman with the white streaks in the side of the hair, you know, right? Yeah. And he's like, okay, so this is like the Earth 2 Superman. And I was like, what's Earth 2? Oh. And like at this point, I had no idea. I don't think I'd ever heard the word multiverse. Wow. Because I'm like I've only seen Super Friends and I've seen Linda Carter and whatever, right? Sure. And at any rate, so I'm like, I don't know what you mean. And I was just kind of like, well, I heard that Superman came out in 1938. And he's like, well, that's true. And I was like, so I mean, I saw some pictures somewhere we had the whiteness hair, and I really liked that. So I figure if he's been around since 1938, you know. Yeah. And so I had a lot of these misconceptions. And so he's trying to explain comic book time to me. And here's where things go really south. He starts to explain post-crisis Superman to me, and to his face, I'm like, well, that sucks. That's fucking awful. That's the worst idea I've ever heard. Superman's weak? I don't want a story about a weak Superman. All he can do is lift a yacht. He came out in the 80s. Fuck that. That's horrible. Who wants to read that shit, you know? And he's just like, really? You know? And he's like, well, what would you do? And so this comes down.
I see where he's going with this.
So at any rate, and then this is all about what we're talking about tonight. He goes, well, what would you do if you were doing it? And I'd be like, I'd have Superman come out in 1938. I'd have him lift the green car over his head. Yeah. I'd have him punching Nazis, dude. I would do all that stuff. I would have him videotaping the freaking bomb tests. I'd have him punching communists in the 50s. I'd have him weep when JFK was assassinated, you know? And so John Byrne's like, okay, I hear what you're saying, that Superman doesn't get old or whatever. That's fine. Well, what about Batman? And I said, Robin. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I mean, he's training someone, right? He's training Dick Grayson. Right. Why would Dick Grayson not just become Batman?
And Chris,
and he's
hold just a minute. Do you realize you were basically, before there was ever a Batman Beyond, you came up with all of this?
Well, no, it gets better. It gets better. Hang in there. It gets way better. Or way worse, depending on your point of view. Yeah. But at any rate, so I'm like, okay, well, I would just have Dick Grayson take over. And he's like, well, a lot of people are going to think that it has to be Bruce Wayne. I'm like, okay, fine. Jesus, dude, it's a Lazarus pit, right? Throw him in a Lazarus pit. He's young again. He's like madness. And I said, I don't know, throw something else in there with him that it's up to the writer. It's comic books. Yeah. Right? Just do something where it works out, and he's sane, and he can be Batman forever then. And And so he's like, well, which one is it? And I said, I like the Dick Grayson thing because Dick Grayson's a more lighthearted character, and that gives us the 66 Batman.
Yeah.
And then I would say Adam West is adult Dick Grayson.
Mm-hmm.
And then his sidekick can be like, you know, whatever, be Jason Todd or whatever. And then eventually, maybe in the 90s or something, Jason Todd is Batman and his Robin is Tim Drake, you know? And I was like, and it's like knights training squires, and it's this constant thing. Or you can just have it be Bruce Wayne the whole time, but, you know, whatever. But that's how you do that. And he goes, okay, what about Green Lantern? And I said, well, you know, I got the price guide or whatever here that says that Hal Jordan shows up in 1959. That's cool. He's the Green Lantern of the 60s then. And it says the Darkseid shows up in like 1972 as his first appearance. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, I would actually have Darkseid kill Hal. And then I would have the ring go to John Stewart. And then John Stewart is your Green Lantern of the 70s. You do something to him, it goes to Guy Gardner. You do something to him, it goes to Kyle Rayner, which at this point is the modern day Green Lantern when this conversation takes place. I'm like, but Green Lanterns are replaceable. With the Flash, it's the same thing. You replace Barry with Wally and so on and so forth, you know? Yeah. And he's like, okay. And so the thing is, from John Byrne's point of view, is like, on the one hand, I'm so excited to meet the guy that I'm literally going to pass out, right? So he realizes, I have no idea he did Man of Steel, you know, that I'm just giving him feedback as a fan. And then the other thing I should mention, because it's going to come up in a minute, is I'm a big fan of Transformers. You may or may not be able to see my collection behind me here.
Yeah.
So when I was going to become a comic book artist, I knew I couldn't tell stories in the DC universe proper, so I was going to make knockoffs of everybody. So kind of like with Image Comics, they have like Supreme or someone who's like a knockoff of Superman, right? So at any rate, I was making knockoffs of the Transformers, and I called them Mechamorphs. Cool. And instead of saying transform and roll out, they would undergo mechamorphosis. And so he gets to this page in my sketchbook, and he reads that, and goes, mechamorphosis. And I said, yeah, you know, it's mecha, like anime. He goes, no, I get it. That's genius. I was like, wow, thank you, sir. That means a lot coming from you. You know? And he signs my She-Hulk comics. He's very, very nice to me. And I leave. And, one other thing. Because I didn't know what a multiverse was, I had Marvel characters in there, too. So, like, I made a ripoff of Spider-Man, and I called him the Cockroach. And his secret identity was Stanley Ditko. You know,
Stanley Ditko!
And so at any rate, and I had all these drawings of all this stuff, So he's taking two things away from it. There's real time, and Marvel and DC coexist, right? So about a year goes by, and I go to my local comic shop, and I see this new comic book called Batman Meets Captain America, set in World War II. Yeah. And I pick it up, and I think, oh, that's kind of weird. Oh, that's John Byrne. Hey, I love John Byrne. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird that he went with the Batmans in the Golden Age and whatever. And I bought it, and I forgot about it. And another year or two, whatever goes by. And then I walk into the comic book, and everybody's looking at me weird. Because these are the guys who play in my game. I'm in there. I won't shut up about the game 24/7, right? And they're like, oh, hey, you're going to want to go check out the new Wednesday comics. And I was like, okay. And they're acting like somebody died. And I picked this comic book up called Batman Superman Generations. Where Superman came out in 1938. Oh. Batman was in the Golden Age, right? And then it's a decade later. The second half of the book is then, instead of 38, it's like 48 or whatever. And now it's, I left a part out of my thing, which was, I was going to have Lois and Clark have a son named Clark Jr. Yeah. And when he grows up in the 80s, I was going to expose Superman to gold kryptonite, and his son takes over and is half as strong as the pre-Crisis Superman was. So the son, by virtue of being half human, is your post-Crisis Superman, right? And at any rate, in the 1948 thing, it's all about the son being born and Joker's trying to expose a pregnant Lois to gold kryptonite and all that. And I'm like, oh my God, it's my game. And I bought every issue. And 1968 is Dick Grayson as Batman. And then the 1978 story is Bruce Wayne goes in a Lazarus pit with something else, which is Ra's al Ghul. And he's not mad. And now Bruce Wayne can be Batman forever, you know? Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, it's my game, you know? And I've never been to a convention where John Byrne was at since, where I would like him to sign him. I would love for him to be like, thank you.
Yeah.
And in 1978, so another thing that connects the two, by the way, is Dick Grayson's Robin, unlike my idea, was Bruce Wayne Jr., who had light-colored hair, right? And then in the Batman Captain America crossover, when they de-thaw or whatever Captain America when he's on ice, that is the light-haired Robin, which is his sneaky way of saying this is the same universe, so this is a Marvel characters coexist with DC thing, right?
Sure.
But at any rate, so the point is you get to the 1978 issue, and it's the pre-crisis green-skinned Kalluan version of Brainiac. And it's like ripping his face off, and it's the Terminator 80s metal Brainiac underneath, which I'd drawn a bunch of pictures of. I love that Brainiac. And he says, once my metamorphosis is complete, I shall destroy you all. And I was like, oh.
That's brilliant.
So that's the John Byrne story. So to answer the big question of what would I do in movies, I would basically do Batman, Superman Generations. I would do it in the Golden Age. I would have an excuse to keep everybody young. I think my first movie would be a Legion of Superheroes thing, where we get your Clark Kent who's in high school kind of thing, like you were talking about with Smallville. Right. You just got to. It has to take place a long time ago for him to be the right age in 1938. And then also to answer the question of, why is it that when he's in the Legion as a kid, he's got all these powers, and in 1938 he doesn't? I would have him run into some villain in the future, like the Parasite or somebody like that, who just took him down, and he had to start over again. Yeah. But I would, that's how I would do it.
That's
I
brilliant.
I would just follow the history of comic books.
And I feel like a story like that, even though he taught you how to go into comics, you kind of had a huge impact on comics, just by inspiring. That is really, really good. But
I don't want to sound immodest or anything, but something that makes me feel kind of better about that whole situation is very frequently, actually, I'll be somewhere online and I'll see people complaining about the state of the actual DC universe, where they're like, man, I don't like this or I don't like that. And but a lot of people are like, what was pretty good was John Byrne's Generations. I kind of wish that was the main continuity. Yeah. And even though I get no credit, I'm like, well, I mean, that's something, that's cool.
Did you, by any chance, ever catch this series, the Wonder Woman 77? Yes. Okay.
Yes, I own it, and I ripped it off in my game.
I was gonna say this is very, very similar. This idea where and they did this actually in the Linda Carter series. She was the same Wonder Woman in World War II and the same Wonder Woman in the 70s, just because she's effectively immortal.
Yeah.
But she spends her time in man's world in World War II, and then she goes back to Paradise Island, then she comes back in the modern day, which was the 70s. And she kills Hitler. Right.
She kills Hitler in, what was it called? Like Auschwitz 77 or something is the name of the episode. It's kind of weird to see Linda Carter kill somebody, but she kills a clone of Hitler.
Huh. This was their crossover, the Linda Carter Wonder Woman with the Adam West Batman. And to do
I saw that.
To do this story, you have Thomas Wayne meeting Wonder Woman in the 40s, when she is, Diana Prince working with the IADC. Oh, no, excuse me, not the IADC. The
Interagency Defense Command.
No, that doesn't
mean
come
back
until
then.
70s. Yeah, in the 40s.
Right,
when she was working with Steve Trevor and whatnot during World War II.
Army Intelligence.
Army Intelligence, exactly. And it was very similar in a lot of ways to what we got with the Captain America film from Marvel. A lot of the same touchstones and whatnot. And she meets a very young Bruce Wayne before his parents are killed. And then later on, she meets, Batman and Robin. And then later on, Robin in the 70s becomes Nightwing. And it was that high-collared 70s style Dick Grayson.
I remember that, yeah.
And that she interacts with and whatnot. And it was really kind of ingenious. I really appreciated that idea. I like to think that in my head canon, and there is an Earth K. There is an Earth K that starts with what DC originally called Earth 2, and it just continues on like that. But with Linda Carter, with Christopher Reeve, with, Adam West, so forth, whatever, I like that idea that there's a universe like that out there. And that's really what you did with your role-playing game. Your role-playing game was basically that universe, although with Marvel analogs as well.
Well,
so tell us more about your role-playing game, how it started in the 80s, and a little bit, as little bit as possible, the idea behind the story.
Well, like in-game or out-of-game? You mean like...
Both.
The out-of-game thing is my family was taking a vacation. It was me and my mom. That was my family. We were taking a vacation. We were in Columbus, Ohio. We went to a place called the Continent, which is really neat. I guess I won't take a lot of time describing it. But it was kind of like a German village meets New Orleans kind of a thing.
Nice.
And they had
probably a great place to be for Oktoberfest.
It was, I think they did that. And but we were there in the summer, like summer of '85, and it was a cool place. It's a cool place to go as an adult, but as a kid, it's like, where's the toy store? And it's like, well, they got a candle shop, or whatever, and I was like, yeah, this kind of not really having a great time. And so at any rate, we go into they had an OSU bookstore, and because this is 1985. They have a whole display for kids with a big cardboard cutout of Christopher Reeve. And I'm like, nice. Dude, and I run over and I pick up DC Heroes First Edition, which I still have. I still have the box and all that. And at any rate, I thought it was a board game. I had no idea what a role-playing game was. And so, we spent the day there. We go back to the hotel that night. And so I'm like, I want to swim because I grew up on a farm. We didn't have a pool or anything like that. So that was a big treat. So I'm in the pool for hours. I have no idea how long. And my mom was a very smart person. So my mom reads the intro thing and figured out how to run DC Heroes and the time it took me to swim in a swimming pool. And we go back to the room and order pizza or whatever. And she runs the first adventure. And they had, I think they called them solitaire modules, which were basically games for one person. And so we were doing that. She was helping me figure it out, And my very first character that is the one through line through the whole game is this guy that eventually people call him the Bear. But he started off as just take Superman and reverse the red and the blue. And I had no idea who Mon-El was, but I basically recreated Mon-El from the Legion of Superheroes, But he had brown hair instead of black hair, At any rate, so I played the guy. He didn't have a name in this first adventure. And I think the first adventure is somebody steals what today we'd call a thumb drive, and it had 1 gig of memory. So, of course, the world is on the brink, and people are going to nuke each other. because there's a 1 gig thumb drive, and at any rate, I think Deathstroke, the Terminator, breaks in and steals it. And you're supposed to play a member of the Teen Titans, and I'm like, who the hell are the Teen Titans? You know, I want to use Superman's character sheet. You know, so I just blow through it. You know, obviously because it's not built for. And I didn't know what the Crisis was, but they give you pre-Crisis Superman stats. So everything in our game is built around that pre-Crisis power level to this day. But at any rate, so, you know, my guy, I think what it is Deathstroke launches a nuke towards New York. And it's like, you can either catch me or stop the nuke. So I'm like, well, obviously you stop the nuke and save people, and someone else can go get the key drive. And at any rate, that was the first adventure. And then we played the solitaire things. And each one is kind of a one-shot where it's, there's a thing, I think, called Everywhere Quest, something like that. And it's a Hal Jordan story, and there's, I don't know, there's one called Hot Pursuit, I think, that is like Superman versus Amazo. But we did those, and then in 1989 is when a guy named Wayne Birch opened the comic book store, and then when he was running DC Heroes, me just being a kid, I'm like, can this be a thing, you know? Can we do what we're doing at home? Can I be my character and all that? And he said, yeah, sure. I don't care. Whatever. And so it was the same game. And then other people start playing. And then when we get to high school is when things get a little bit complicated. So let's see. The third GM was Greg Sheets, who might be watching this. Shout out to Greg. Greg ran a big, he I think is the first one that really started to line it up with what was going on in comics at the time. Like Wayne would just come up with his own stuff. Like he did one where it was Kara Zor-El's rocket is coming from Krypton and it ends up in Nazi Germany. And so Hitler raises her like as a daughter and calls her Uberfrau. And so then the problem in that game is, how do you stop when everybody else is kind of not a Kryptonian character? How do you stop an angry Supergirl, you know? And you they talked her out of being evil over a series of games was the gist.
Wow.
At any rate, he also did a thing where Barry Allen ran so fast he ended up in the Old West. So he was Marshall Allen, fastest gun in the West. So those were like Wayne's games.
Elseworld before there was an Elseworld.
Was Jonah Hex in the Western one?
Yeah. And then that was another thing, mind you, we didn't know what the word multiverse meant. So we had the Western Ghost Rider, we had like the Lone Ranger, you know, it was just kind of like, have we heard of a cowboy that kind of fights crime? Then he's there, you know. And so then in high school, my best friend in high school, Jay Mora, he started running the game, and this is going to sound like a reboot, but it's really not. He sort of said, you know, the bear character, let's focus on, it was essentially Smallville for him. And so the idea was he was a kid, and you got to buy strength with points. Before I was just using Superman's character sheet. Yeah. And so the idea is he keeps leveling up, just like in Dungeons and Dragons or something. The more you play, the tougher you get. And so at the time, he went by the name Powerhouse. He gets reasonably strong. Like by the end of his high school career, he can like lift a car over his head finally. You know, like when he was a freshman, it was maybe more like I can lift a motorcycle, like that level of strength. Sure. And so, so then Jay graduated, and I didn't want the game to end. That was my favorite thing in the world, was playing the game with my friends. And so the last story he ran was the bear finds Excalibur and pulls Excalibur from the stone. And basically there's this mystical character there who basically says, like, you have no idea who you are, do you? And they're like, you know, Arthur means bear. And so he's like, I don't follow. You
He's
know, and they're
Captain
like,
Britain.
you got a big destiny ahead of you. And we had no idea who Captain Britain was, by the way. But they're like, well, you got the big destiny ahead of you, blah, blah, blah. And so then when I was in college, I ran this game where there's this group of neo-Nazis and they have like laptops and shit. And they're going to send them back in time using a Nazi time machine. Right? And they're going to send it back to Hitler. And they're going to change time. Right? And so at any rate, the bear jumps into the time thing and is like smacking this stuff around and all that. And so he vanishes. And so at any rate, the idea is he ends up in the past, right? And so, you know, I kind of already gave it away. He's immortal. He doesn't get old. And so, for instance, when he's in Ireland, in the BC era, the locals start to call him Dagda. And if you're familiar with Irish mythology at all, Dagda was kind of like their Zeus, but then he's also kind of like their Aphrodite. You know, he was sort of like what Irish people, like what Irish men, it was like a wish fulfillment character of like, this is the ultimate man, basically. And so, but at any rate, depending on who you listen to, Dagda means bear. And that's the dots we start connecting. So then he's doing the Highlander thing through the years. And then he's in the Germanic area, and Beowulf means Beowulf, which means bear. So he was Beowulf. And he ends up in the Camelot era, and he's Arthur. Or he ends up as the inspiration for Shakespeare, and he is Oberon, which when you do the original spelling of Auberon, that is where the word bear, the Oberon, it's all connected. So we're saying that all through history, he was this like legendary guy. And as a kid in the 90s, he had no idea that he mattered at all, you know? Yeah. And so when he catches up to World War II and he's fighting Nazis and all that stuff, there's an adventure then where the Nazis have this castle called Wavelsburg, which is like where there's these video games based on it called
Castle
Wolfenstein. Yeah, it's based on a real place called Wavelsburg, and in real life, the Nazis wanted to get their hands on stuff like this. I'm not saying they did, but they wanted to, for real. So we said they found Excalibur somewhere. So he kicks him around and gets the sword back. And there's a really cool adventure that it involved an aircraft hangar full of clone pods. And so they had taken DNA from like Superman and Captain Marvel and guys like that. And they made this guy named Blitzkrieg. And he was sort of like the big baddie of that campaign. And at any rate, everybody has to fight Blitzkrieg and blah, 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 blah. And like we don't run all of the games in order. We'll skip around and we'll think of something and we'll go, oh, that would fit really good here. And so we ran this one when the Iron Man movie came out. My friend Chris Krause was like huge into Iron Man. And he's like, I want to play Golden Age Iron Man. And I'm like, that's not a thing. You can't be Golden Age Iron Man. That's like 1963, 64 or something like that. Right. And so he's like, can I be Howard Stark? And I said, yeah. And this is before Captain America: The First Avenger. So I'm like, sure, I'll let you be Howard. That lineup, you can be Howard Stark. And so it turns out there's this Nazi guy called Iron Cross that is basically Ironmonger with a big. So in the course of the adventure, Howard Stark shoots him in the head as he's running for the mech, and then Howard Stark gets in it. You know, and I'm like, well, that's a little, I don't know how I feel about that, Gross, but okay, whatever. So then they fight, what's his name? I want to say Perdegaton, but he's a Nazi villain with he does time travel all the time. And so he goes back in time, and you find out he went to the quote-unquote funeral of Arthur, which is more like Arthur in a coma. And so Morgan Le Fay, and they're in the Arthurian mythology, she has multiple sisters that are all kind of sort of named Morgan Le Fay. And so they're like the pallbearers taking them to the island of Avalon. And they've got Excalibur. And so he steals it, And then he goes back to earlier in that adventure, and that's why the Nazis had it, right? But so Howard Stark in his knight's armor, quote unquote, and I think Dr. Fate was the other one. They show up and they're like, "Is he here?" And they're like, "No, why? What's going on?" And they end up telling these guys like, "Oh, well, King Arthur's in the future." And they're like, "King Arthur's alive in the future?" And he's like, yeah, he's fine. And so they're like, "Oh my God, the once and future king." And so like they're through their fumbling, they're responsible for the whole once and future king thing, you know. And so we've been kind of dangling that carrot for a really long time that in the 20th century or 21st century now, the Bears should probably get around to doing something like befitting the once and future king story. So that's kind of what we're doing now in the game is we just started this thing where we're doing reptilian humanoids from the Hollow Earth, like Skartaris. Basically, think of it like scrolls from Skartaris. And we're doing kind of this Arthur versus dragons kind of vibe. But the scrolls have infiltrated the governments of the world. And we're basically saying, no matter what country you're talking about, the leader is not human. It's this reptilian thing. And so now Arthur's going around slaying dragons, and the people of the world are kind of like, maybe we should do like a Star Trek Federation kind of, maybe Arthur's our guy, you know. And so we're doing that because we feel like that's bound to happen with the Once and Future King story. And I do feel like the modern era
Camelot
to me seems
3000,
like
folks.
we could use a King Arthur in real life. Like the world is not fantastic right
not
now.
Wrong. You're not wrong.
And so we're
And I'll
doing
tell
that.
you, Charles ain't it. Charles ain't friggin' it.
Right.
Just saying.
And so I think after this, then we're probably going to try to get into dimension travel. Because like my kids are wanting to run games and they can't keep track of all the stuff I've done. So I'm like, maybe we do like a sliders kind of thing. And then that way every week, you know, you don't have to know everything about Earth K if you're running whatever. Earth 8675309 or whatever.
8675309. Yeah, that's, man, great stuff. Real quick, kind of going back a little bit in what you were sharing. Sure. So you remember that?
Yes, I own it.
That was the first novel, well, the first module, I suppose, from the original box set. That was my introduction to the Titans. My introduction to the Titans was first through the role-playing game. Then I started collecting Tales of the Teen Titans. Then I started collecting the new Teen Titans, not knowing exactly what the connection was between them. Little confusing. I'm not even sure I understand to this day if one was like a reprint of the others, or I don't know. It got very confusing. But that's how I started getting into the Teen Titans and collecting them like voraciously. And kind of fell in love with the idea of Nightwing. Dick Grayson is kind of sacrosanct to me. He is much maligned in the modern day, and I don't know.
They call him Rick Grayson in the comics now, right? Was that a thing?
Fuck that bullshit. Fuck that bullshit. Everything, you know, from like 2020 on. Well, I have to go back further than that. I would almost say 2010 on. Forget comics.
For me, it's 2004. I quit reading when they killed Ted Kord.
Okay, again, old man here. The years kind of run together for me. Once Identity Crisis happened, DC Comics ceased to exist for me. You know,
right? Yeah, I don't know the name of the thing, but they did. It was like it was all around the same time. It's like Wonder Woman snaps Maxwell Lord's neck. I didn't like that. But the big one for me was they brought back the Superman of Earth 2. And he sort of looks around and is like, your world sucks. Look at all the problems you have. Like, you guys suck at your job. I'm going to whip you into shape. And that's something where I differ a lot. Like, my idea of Superman is inherently fatherly. And I think a lot of people don't really see that. I think Superman should, because it's kind of about like respecting your elders or respecting that he came first, that kind of thing. I really like a Superman that was in the Justice Society, and that's why I give him the white streaks and everything, is I want him to be an authority figure. I'm losing my train of thought there. What was I going to say? But yeah. So when they brought him back, I was like, oh yeah, like show him what's what, Superman. And instead they kill him. They give him, they weren't honoring the character at all. I felt like that was the very beginning of forcing your ideals on people. Like, I despise Grant Morrison. I know a lot of people love Grant Morrison, but I can't stand him. I think he's just immoral in real life and incapable of writing.
I agree with you.
Actual moral stuff, And so at any rate, I think what he was doing was, I think he was saying that the Earth 2 Superman represented politically everything he disliked. And then the modern day Superman represented everything that Grant Morrison was into. And so he basically, if I remember correctly, he beats Earth 2 Superman to death. And as Earth 2 Superman is dying, he says, I'm sorry, you guys were all right the whole time. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm done.
I have mentioned on my channel numerous times, Netter and I going to Metropolis, Illinois for the Superman celebration. And I've made some great friends there, including one individual, not going to mention him by name, but he and his wife are like the embodiment of the Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder, Clark and Lois. They totally got that, right? And I remember having a chat with him about Superman in the comics at the time. And he was having a real struggle with it because he's, very much of that traditional Superman, Clark Kent, Christopher Reeve era thing. And he was bothered by something I hadn't thought too much about at the time. There was, and I don't remember if this was Grant Morrison or not, but it was definitely in that era where they had kind of redone the origin of Superman. They were kind of retelling the story, and they were depicting Clark as a vegan because he had this. So Superman has all these vision abilities, and he can see.
Right, I'm very familiar.
Infravision, he can see ultraviolet, and he can see all this, right?
Right.
And he could see an aura around living creatures, which was their way of kind of explaining his reverence for, life. And apparently this was a problem for him, so this is why he couldn't eat beef, because he, respected life so much, he's got to be a vegan. And I remember this individual saying to me, he's like, I cannot get behind a kid who grew up on a farm in Kansas having a problem with a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
It's like,
me too, big time.
Which I respected the hell out of what he was saying, but then I couldn't follow this guy on social media anymore because he went super woke. And it's like, dude, you fell to the dark side, man. So what's wrong with you? But
that was Birthright by Mark Waid.
Oh, okay, Mark Waid. Okay.
Yeah, with his life vision. I
great
grew up on a
story
farm.
idea though. That whole timey-wimey thing, that was pretty cool.
I didn't read it. I sort of flipped through it, and I think I just happened to land on the life vision part. And I grew up on a farm not far from where Golden Age Superman started out, raised by elderly farmers who grew up in the Depression.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, I like cheeseburgers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't think. Well, also, for that matter, not to go off on a tangent, there's this thing where bugs were attacking a tree out in, I think it was California. And so the tree, it was too late to save itself, but it started making these clicking noises. And the scientists recorded these clicking sounds. They're like, well, what the hell is this, right? So they played them on a tape recorder for trees on the East Coast, and they all started to produce a sap that was poisonous to that one kind of bug.
Huh.
Interesting.
So, Superman, you should know that trees are alive with your life vision. Do you eat salad?
That's an excellent point. That's brilliant. No, I have real issues with that. I don't know, man. It's
and if they had Oliver Queen doing that, I wouldn't bat an eye. I'm like, sure, great, do whatever. It's Ollie.
Yeah, between Oliver Queen and Hal Jordan, let me tell you something. That was
good stuff.
For those people that want to, talk about, modern politics in comics, that's how it was done right? Just like Star Trek The Next Generation. Oh, Star Trek was always progressive. No. It was always thoughtful, right? It had a way of dealing with... Go ahead.
I love Star Trek, right? Mm-hmm. I love Star Trek. I'm trying to rewatch Next Gen with my son, and there are moments like Riker goes to a planet with kind of like it's a Romulan colony that got caught off from him, and at any rate, the one main Romulan of the story is like one of Clarence Boddicker's goons from RoboCop. I can't think of the actor's name, but they are forced to beam him to the Enterprise, and he wakes up on the operating table because of his Vulcan whatever immune, he's so tough that they can't keep him under. And Picard is like, all right, save his life. And they're like, right away, Captain Picard. And he's like, Picard. And they send him back down. And he's like, the Picard saved me. We should abandon our religion and we should worship the Picard, Yeah. And that episode is very heavy-handed against religion about saying anybody who's religious is, so I respectfully would just say that my thing is Star Trek can at times have writers who are extremely good at showing you both sides and letting the viewer make up his mind what he thinks. But sometimes there are episodes that watching it now, I'm like, you really let me down.
Yeah.
Next Gen. This one's kind of ham-fisted. Yeah.
At the same time, it's easy to... because of the way it was sci-fi, you could go, well, but Picard isn't a god. So in the narrative as it's told, this is fair,
I have a hard time with that because I agree with you. At what point is it propaganda?
I get
at what point is I watched Guardians of the Galaxy last night. I watched Guardians of the Galaxy last night. It was very similar ideas where James Gunn was taking a lot of his attitudes about religion and he was using the high evolutionary as a metaphor for God.
Sure.
And all the animal stuff the high evolutionary made, like Rocket Raccoon, which I don't think is any kind of a spoiler. Those are basically like God creating mankind. And at any rate, it was really hard for me to enjoy it. I couldn't separate it because I guess the whole time I'm thinking there are kids, like impressionable kids are going to watch this who are not as, with it as we are maybe, where we can see what's going on. And it just makes me kind of sad that how, even if you change the stuff, it can still be propaganda.
Oh, I hear what you're saying. Real quick, I want to say hi to Mr. J. Welcome, my friend. Actually, right now, we're specifically on a little side tangent on Star Trek.
Sorry about that.
I agree with you, but when you have to... And I feel like we run into this problem where people tend to focus on a single episode. And it's like, canon doesn't work that way. You have to take it all in. And you have to take into account Star Trek 5. and you have to take into account so many other things, right? You need to take into account the original series. You know, when people want to claim that Star Trek has done away with religion in the 24th and 25th century, I go, no. Uhura was clearly Christian.
I really like the one episode where it ends in the original series. They go to, like, it's Rome, but the gladiatorial events are televised.
That's what I was leading up to, yes.
They're only sun worshippers.
They're sun
right,
worshippers.
and she's like,
not
no, not
S-U-N, S-O-N.
Right. And also a shout out to Benjamin Sisko. I thought the DS9 stuff treated religion with respect, you know.
Yep.
And I'm not saying we should throw all of Star Trek out, right? Just to my reaction, I guess, to saying like Star Trek wasn't woke. I just meant here's one example of sometimes it was. I think.
Yep. No, you're right, but I think it was tempered enough by the totality of its canon that I could say, yeah, Picard wasn't a god, so that's fair. You know, that doesn't mean there isn't a god. You know,
right.
People try to say it's so secular, and it's like, why were they still celebrating Christmas in Nemesis? You know, I mean, there's I think there's enough writers that acknowledge that you're not going to eliminate religion even by the 25th century. It's just
I'm going to go a little bit against the grain. I know we have some friends in common who will talk about Watchmen and like really hate Watchmen, you know. But something that I'm not saying Watchmen is, you know, anything really, but something I liked about Watchmen was I actually felt like each character in the story represents a certain philosophy or political point of view or whatever.
Sure.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, the writer doesn't come in and say, and by the way, Rorschach was right. Rorschach was in the right. They never do that. They just, it ends and you walk away. And then for me, I read Watchmen, and for a month after I read it, I was just thinking about it. Like, what do I think of this? Like, do I think that it's okay to fake whatever alien invasion if it means you save the world? Do I agree with Rorschach that you should never tell a lie no matter what, you know? So I appreciate Watchmen for that, actually. And sometimes Star Trek does that. They have a euthanasia.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, sorry. I was just going to say real quick, they had a episode I really liked. It had the one guy from MASH. I can't think of the character's name. And the topic was euthanasia. And when they start the episode, because it's something like he studies suns or something, and it's like his 65th birthday is coming up, and they missed their window of opportunity or something, right? And he's like, well, that's what I spent my whole life on, and I have to die on my 65th birthday because that's what my culture does. And the episode starts off very like, oh, they're barbarians, they're in the wrong, and, you know, they should conform to whatever is our culture, blah, blah, blah. And then, and it's sort of, they break it down by 20-minute sections of episode, you know. And so then at Act 2, for that second 20 minutes, you're like, oh, well, now they're kind of given the other side of it, and it's his choice. Thank you, Evelyn.
David Ogden Stiers. He was supposed to be married to not Marina Sears, Majel Barrett's character in the
Laxwana Troy.
Yes, thank you.
He was also a Martian Manhunter briefly.
Really?
Yeah, and the really poorly done live action Justice League TV show.
Oh.
He was their he was a fat manhunter, and their headquarters was a submarine.
I'd heard of that. I never saw it though.
Really? That was David Ogden Stiers? I didn't even realize.
Yeah.
Holy
they
crap.
have some, I mean, it's interesting to watch. I'll say that. I don't despise it. It's interesting to watch.
I love
I would have been. I would have just. I would be okay if they had brought him into voice acting. If we got something with him as the voice of Martian Manhunter, I actually thought he was acting the part really well. He just didn't have the physicality for it.
I gotta say about Martian Manhunter and live action castings and voice actors, I have kind of come around to the idea that I like the idea of a black actor playing Martian Manhunter as John Jones. It's happened in Smallville and a whole bunch of other places.
Justice League cartoon.
The Justice League cartoon and so forth. And I kind of like the idea. And I suspect if I was reading comics today, I would expect to see that in the comics these days. That's one of those examples where we're talking about a shape changer. So he could take any form he wants to. And if you want to do that with him, I'm all for it. And all of the voice actors and all the physical actors that have played him since Smallville, I think they've got something there. I'm really into that. I want to bring up this comment from Sir Torin. He says that's why I like J. Michael Straczynski with Babylon 5. He's an atheist, made peace with the fact that religion is not going away, and was respectful of it for the most part. There was a great episode I remember of Babylon 5 where everyone all the races on the station are going to do a little presentation about religion on their planets. And all the planets have unified religions except Earth. So the captain of the station has no idea what he's going to do. To the very end of the episode, kind of the epilogue of the episode, he brings all the ambassadors into like the shuttle bay or whatever, and there's a line of people. And he says, I want to introduce you to Father so-and-so. He's a Roman Catholic priest. I want to introduce you to so-and-so. He's a Jewish rabbi. And he goes down the line, all the representation of all the different religions on earth. And I was like, and I kind of got exactly what Sir Torin is saying here. It's like, yeah, I get that J. Michael Straczynski doesn't subscribe to any religion, but it seems like he respects people who are religious. That's pretty cool in my opinion. I can dig that, you know?
Yeah.
But
and
yeah.
I always tell people, no matter where you're at on the spectrum, right? The world is not going to get any better by us being mean to each other.
Right. Right.
Every single human being has to be patient, and you got to be willing to talk to people with an opinion that's not your own, you know? Yeah.
I will throw out some very highbrow, high-level stuff to you to look into if you're interested. Okay? First, there is a theory that human beings, through evolution or through whatever you want to, ascribe to it, are religious by nature, by genetics. That there is a God gene.
Part in your brain. You got the God lobe.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of those wonderful naturalistic things where it works because of the way evolution works, or it's part of intelligent design. Either way, it works. It exists, but your interpretation of why it exists, entirely up to you. Very interesting stuff. But there is also, and this is another thing, a lot of people aren't as knowledgeable about this, but the idea that as primates, humans are, by natural selection, a domesticated ape. So if you want to Google the concept of domesticated ape, Jordan Peterson actually did a great little bit on this. This idea that the reason we are so different from so many other animals in nature is because by evolution or design, or however you want to put it, we are a kind of domesticated creature. And that explains our society, our interconnectivity, our high-mindedness. Just throwing that out there. It's something to look into. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting theory. But anyway.
So we mentioned that I live not too far away from Mansfield, Ohio. Mansfield is kind of famous for its reformatory.
Yes, it is. Every time I say my family lives in Mansfield, Ohio, they look at me strange like, is your family all like criminals? No. It's not like that. But yeah, go on.
Oh, well, it's been on Ghost Hunters and so on and so forth. It's up there with like the Penhurst and Style in Pennsylvania.
If anyone in the chat has ever seen the movie Shawshank Redemption, it was filmed in the penitentiary in Mansfield. Are you?
I'm one of the cops at the end of the movie when they show how he got away. I'm running down a stream with a bunch of German Shepherds. But you wouldn't recognize me because I was clean shaven. All my hair was up here and I wasn't fat. So
I got to rewatch it now. That's awesome.
But yeah, I'm at the end of the movie. My mom was in charge of catering at the Holiday Inn in Mansfield. And Castle Rock Entertainment spent, their time there. I met Tim Robbins, huge dick.
I'm not surprised in the slightest.
Saw Morgan Freeman around, never got to go up and talk to him or anything like that.
Sure.
Weirdly enough, the guy that I got along with the best was Booger from Revenge of the Nerds.
Oh, I hear he's a great guy.
Yeah, he's awesome. And I saw him drinking at a water fountain one day, and I walk up and he just turns around, and without thinking, I was like, Booger! Like that. And he just laughed. Because to this day, I have no idea what his real name is, right? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I know, you're not the guy. He's like, I got it. And I was like, God, I love that movie, And here's the weird thing. Watch Shawshank and find him in the movie. I can't find him anywhere. But he was there. They must have filmed scenes with him. He's not in the final cut of the movie. But at any rate, what I was going to say is, so when I was in college, we had a group of guys that started doing the EVPs and all that stuff. And we would go out to the haunted reformatory with tape recorders and ask questions like, you get it. You've seen the TV shows. And so I've had a lot of weird experiences. And I'll just say this. I kind of stay away from conversations about religion. Because if I start telling people what I think about it, just when you're not there and you don't experience it yourself, it's too hard to believe. And I just come off like a liar, so I just don't talk about it. But I always tell people, I'm like, these places exist. Go. Just go do it yourself,
Yeah. Real quick, because I'm kind of a big fan, Curtis Armstrong is the one that played Booger in Revenge of the Nerds. He was also a character in the last season of Moonlighting. I loved his character. He was like the boyfriend of the receptionist. It's been so long, I don't remember. You know what? I have the whole series on DVD. I think Netter and I are going to end up rewatching that over the next month or two. Yeah, because I love that show.
It is so weird to see young Bruce Willis now with like a full head of hair. Like for me, I always treated entertainment as escapism, right? Sure. I want stuff that's far-fetched that kind of makes me forget all my problems in my day-to-day life. So for instance, because of that, I never watch cop shows, lawyer shows, doctor shows, because those are things we have in real life, right? So I'd never seen Miami Vice. And over quarantine, I bought the whole series on DVD, and I'm like, I want to see what all the fuss is about. And I'd never seen Magnum PI. I watched that and loved it, and I feel like now that I'm older, I'm into more stuff than I used to be. Like I didn't like Westerns as a kid. Now I like Westerns. So at any rate, with a mature eye, I'm like, let's watch Miami Vice. And the first few episodes are like awesome. And then there's the quality just goes downhill kind of fast. But there's an episode with a very young Bruce Willis as a drug dealer, and it just wrecks your mind. And he's like beating a woman or something. It's like stuff you never see Bruce Willis do. And it's like, man, I can't. And then like, what's his face? Al Bundy, Ed O'Neill. He plays like Yeah, he's in an episode of Miami Vice as like a coke dealer or something, and I'm like, wow, I'm having a really hard time taking Al Bundy serious, like threatening to shoot Don Johnson in the face, you know?
Yeah, no, I get that. It's kind of funny that you mentioned that because, dude, I'm too far into this bottle of wine to remember details. The actor who played Gowron in Star Trek, Robert O'Reilly.
Oh,
Yeah.
Robert O'Reilly.
the eyes.
Oh, those eyes. Oh,
Yes.
he used to do that at conventions. On request, it's like, do the eyes, and he'd go. You know, and it was just amazing.
He was terrifying.
He seems like a cool guy.
He played villains in, I want to say, like Wonder Woman and like shows of that era. He played like,
I've heard that. Knight Rider.
like Knight Rider, yeah, like a bunch of stuff, and but we all know him from playing Gower. Let me tell you. So Evelyn Hampton and I, and Netter and some other people that follow the channel, we do the Klingon thing. And at one convention, he was there. This was before the actors were allowed to, if they chose to, be in costume. Nowadays, Robert O'Reilly and
Martok?
that plays Martok.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Hertzker. I forget. I forget his name. They now do the makeup and the costumes made by people in the Star Trek community that I know personally. But before that, they couldn't do that. So he was just there out of costume. But we treated him like the Chancellor of the Empire. And we did. This was at the Odeum in Villa Park, Illinois. It was a convention called the Big Bang. We all call it the Big Bust because they overpromised and underdelivered. And the stars that showed up, most of the cast of Babylon 5, Mark Hamill, Robert O'Reilly, John Delancey, who played Q. When they were told by the fans what was promised by the convention, they were like, we didn't know anything about this. But every single one of them went out of their way to try and appeal to the fans, to make up for the shortcomings of the convention.
I think I heard about that.
Yeah. And what's his name? Bill Mumy, who played he played some role in Babylon 5, I forget. He was one of the not Narn. The guys with the bald heads and the
Minbari.
The Minbari, thank you. He played one of the Minbari. He was there. Bill Mumy, of course. Most of us older folks remember him from Will Robinson from Lost in Space.
Oh, right.
He was there with his band, and he did a performance in the pub at the location, which I thought was awesome. John Delancey did a impromptu question and answer in the auditorium. He just sat in one of the chairs in the auditorium. People just sat around him, and he just sat and chatted with people. He was wonderful.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right. And Robert O'Reilly, we told him that we had been promised that Gowron was going to do an inspection of the troops. And he's like, and that we would be given these banners and so on and so forth, and a chance to interact with him. He's like, well, I can't do anything about that banner, but he's like, I'll do the on-stage, inspection of the troops and everything. And we're like, that's cool. So we all lined up, and he did the inspection of the troops, and he goes, Marge, you all have great honor. And when he got to the last one, I handed him, I was the last Klingon, I handed him an Ertel model that I had made of the bird of prey. And it was with the symbol of our ship, our local ship. And I don't know if he still has it to this day, but it was kind of cool to give that to Gowron. You know, it was he was good people. Real quick, I want to say hi. I want to say hi to and Michael, don't think you're getting special treatment. I do this whenever I see a new face in the chat, but Dirt Mall Convention trying to hoodwink Selleck guests and attendees. It's DashCon all over again. I don't know if I'm just too drunk to understand what you're talking about or if you're making references I'm unaware of. It's a story that I need to hear later, but very, very interesting. By the way, Michael, I sent you a message on Patreon. Love to not only get you on the channel, but specifically in a couple of weeks, Real Star Wars Day. Real Star Wars Day is for true fans the 25th of May. That's the anniversary of the release of Star Wars. I am going to be doing a watch party of the original Star Wars. And by original, I mean not Episode 4, not A New Hope, no Jabba the Hutt scene, and Han Solo shot only. I will be hosting. Yep, I will be hosting that off platform on Cosme. The link will be provided in the chat so you can watch along with us. And Michael, if you're available that day and you're interested and you want to join us, let me know. That would be a lot of fun. But anyway, so yeah, that's my little Big Bang Babylon 5 Star Trek story. I think Evelyn had to drop out, but she would confirm everything that Netter and I experienced at that convention. It was a wild time. Yeah.
Can I tell a quick convention story?
Please, absolutely do.
This is my favorite convention story of all time. I was at Mid-Ohio. This is after the John Byrne story. This is like 3 years later or whatever. Sure. I'm down at Mid-Ohio, and I see Lou Ferrigno. And he's over.
I got a Lou Ferrigno story to tell after this. Yeah.
Okay. So he's over at, like, he's got a card table in front of him with, photographs of the Hulk and da-da-da-da. And he's just standing there, and he looks like he's in a bad mood. I couldn't tell you what year this is, maybe like 97 or something. And at any rate, he just looks like he's in kind of a bad mood, and he's wearing like the tank top, and his arms, I kid you not, are like, he's like bigger than my head, Well, and I was a big guy, and then I felt small. And like, I don't know if anybody ever made me feel small before, right? And so I walk up to Lou Ferrigno, and I said, hey, man, I grew up on the Incredible Hulk, had Incredible Hulk shoes when I went to kindergarten, blah, 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 blah. And he's just kind of like, okay, that's nice. It just seemed bored. And I was like, cool. So you want to wrestle? And he's like, what? And I was like, I just think it would be really cool to like be able to say I fought the Hulk, I think that'd be really cool. And so he kind of looks at me for a minute like, you dumbass. It's kind of look on his face. He goes, okay. And so like he steps out from behind the card table, and he kind of does, I got back up. He kind of just does this like when you're in high school wrestling or whatever. Sure. And so I'm thinking this is my one chance in my entire life to say I wrestled Lou Ferrigno. So I was like, and I just tackle him as hard as I freaking can. And I actually knocked him down, and I'm just like, I'm so excited and I'm thinking of, yay, I knocked, and like effortlessly, he just like, whoo, he just threw me. I don't know how many feet I went, but like for a second, I'm like, I'm flying, like this is amazing. It's like throwing a baby into a swimming pool. And mind you, at the time, I was probably like 350, something like that, Yeah. And I'm built like a linebacker, and it's nothing to Lou. And he throws me to the side, and all my buddies are they're Trekkies, and they're doing security at the convention, and they see me just tackle Lou, and they're like, what the hell's happening? And so he throws me, and I think he's like, what the fuck, And I get up just like, that was amazing, And then like I was laughing, and then he started laughing, and then we talked, right?
Yeah.
And so at any rate, I go down then the next year, which is like 98 or whatever, 99, something like that. And then I see Lou, and I'm like walking through the crowd, and I was like, "Hey, Lou," and he goes, "Don't hit me," like that, just joking. And I was like, "That's awesome," and I mean, I guess that's hard to forget. And so then I go down the next year, which is either 99 or 2000 or whatever, probably 2000, and so my one friend that's with me, his name's Josh Boggs, and David Carradine is there. And David Carradine is just drunk as a skunk, and it's like 8 a.m. when the convention opens.
I like him already.
He's bombed out of his mind, and he's sitting under a no smoking sign, and he's smoking. And he just is like these effing kids, like, God, I just hate these people, is kind of his vibe. And so we walk up to him, and Josh starts talking to him, and Josh is like, so I have my own karate school, and I grew up on your stuff, and I'm such a big fan of yours, and I can't remember specifically what he was saying, but he just starts talking shit to Josh, just treating him like a total piece of crap. And David Carradine, by far, worst celebrity I've ever met. And so I feel bad for Josh, and I look over at Josh, and he's not crying, but his eyes are like shiny.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, this is his childhood hero just telling him he's a piece of crap. And so I was like, so at any rate, you're not even Asian or anything, right? Do you even fucking know martial arts? Or are you just some like Hollywood pussy and it's all bullshit? And so he takes a drag on his cigarette, and he's like looking at me, and he goes, I could kick your ass. And I was like, well, that's a stupid thing to say. For all you know, I'm a GD ninja. And he says, I could kick the shit out of any man here. And I was like, you hold that thought. And I go over to Lou Ferrigno. And I said, Lou, he just said he could kick your ass.
Oh.
So Ferrigno sees me, and he's like, and then I say it, he's like, hold my water. And he just hands me his water and walks over to Lou Ferrigno's table. And then we don't know what happened, because we just all of a sudden get really scared. And we're like, oh, are we going to get in trouble? And we just left. But we would like to, I accidentally stole Lou Ferrigno's water. But we would like to think that Lou Ferrigno beat the shit out of David Carradine, and David Carradine.
I have no doubt about it. And let me just say, that is, so just everybody knows, Chris Kent instigated a fight between Carradine and Ferrigno. Just saying.
So then Lou Ferrigno came to Mansfield like a year or two ago, and he was at the local toy store. And so I told my son, who's 19 now, and I said, you know what we should do? I'll introduce you. He knows me, and you should ask him to arm wrestle. And so we went there, and I'm in line, and there's a million other guys in line and stuff, and Ferrigno's looking in the line at me. And when I went, he was just kind of like, nice to meet you, signs their Hulk DVD. Nice to meet you, signs a Hulk DVD, whatever. And I got up there, and he came over, and I said, I don't know if you remember me, Lou, but we briefly wrestled in like 1997. And he's like, and I suppose you told everybody that you kicked my ass. And I was like, no. I was like, I thought you kicked my ass. And at any rate, I was like, at any rate, so my son wants to arm wrestle you. And he's like, no way. No, I'm not doing it. He's like, I'm an old man now. You can't be doing this stuff to me.
Right.
So we got a photograph of me and Ferrigno and my son all posing together.
That's cool.
But yeah, that's my favorite con story.
Speaking of photographs with Lou Ferrigno, this was back in the 70s, and a little 8-year-old Troy. Well, I was going to say Troy Pacelli, but back then it was Troy Collins. That's a whole different story. I'll share some other time. But little Troy, 8-year-old, went to McCormick Place here in Chicago to the Chicago Auto Show, where Lou Ferrigno was doing a, photograph signing and whatnot. I was there with my mom. Specifically, the only reason we went to the auto show was so that I could meet Lou Ferrigno. This was literally, I want to say, second season of The Incredible Hulk. Was on TV, yeah. And I got up to him, and he's like, hello. He's like, is there something you want me to sign? I'm like, no, sir. I'm not interested in an autograph. I just wanted to shake your hand. And thank you so much for what you do. Yeah. And there was this look on his face that was just so appreciative. Like he felt like $1 million. I don't want autographs. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted to thank you. And he's like, would you like to get a picture of me, with me? And I'm like, can I, Ma? And she's like, yeah. And she takes out her camera. This huge giant of a man picks up little 8-year-old Troy, puts me on his shoulder, and Mom gets a picture of me. Now, I do not have that picture to this day. I remember it being taken, but I don't have the picture. Doesn't matter. I got the memory of it, Yeah. And it was the greatest thing. It was so awesome. I had the best encounter with this guy. He was, and I've heard different stories. I've heard some people say he's the greatest guy. I've heard other people say he's a jerk. Screw y'all. I know what my experience was. That's all I need to know.
He's only ever been great to me, and I feel like he's a human being. He probably has bad days, I met Adam West one time, and he was checking his mail at the hotel where the con was. And I was like, I kind of don't want to bother him, but this is it. Like I'm on my way out. And so I went up and I shook his hand, and I was shocked. I don't think anyone has ever squeezed my hand as hard as Adam West, actually. Adam West just had like an iron grip. And I remember when I was younger, I was always if I ever met Adam West or William Shatner, I wanted to ask who, if you had to fight the other one, who would win, is what I wanted to ask him. And it kind of be kind of a troll in a way. And then he's like crushing my hand, and I'm like, oh God, I think young Adam West was everybody thinks of him as goofy. I don't know. I think that you could have spun. I think you could have used him in Batman 66 and gone a much different route, and that he would have been awesome.
Did you see those animated features that they did with with
the Two-Face?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I also love Harley Quinn in that, which they just gloss over. But for whatever reason, it's something about her personality and the vibe of the 66 show to me is like peanut butter and jelly. And they did a comic book too where she was a roller derby girl. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I can absolutely see that. Yeah.
They were probably setting Harley Quinn up for a third movie, but then Adam West died. That's probably what happened there.
That was that was too bad. So
probably
here's the problem, guys. I kind of pulled a bait and switch. So I did say that we were going to talk through our fixing the DC universe, and really, this was my hook to introduce you all to Chris Kent. Recommend that you guys check out his channel, find out the story behind his role-playing game, because it is its own DC universe, experience. It's a story worth hearing if you are a DC fan. So please, and Stephen, if you could drop Chris's link, although it is of course in the permanent description below. Subscribe, check out his channel. Just go to his first video and just play all. Because it's a great story, and I think it's really worth. You will enjoy it. You will enjoy it, and you will come back here and you will thank me later. Trust me.
Can I defend myself for a second?
If you feel you have something to defend, yeah, go ahead.
They're not all winners. It's like what my thing, because like my primary thing is the game. My primary thing is I want the game to be good for the players, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, the secondary thing is I do love the game. I do think if you look at the big picture, kind of like what you were saying about Star Trek earlier, if you look at the big picture, I think the game is awesome, right?
Right.
But
there's a couple
some
of
episodes
times,
kind of suck. And what it is especially with the game, unlike traditional storytelling. Like here's a quick example, super quick.
Sure.
I love Alan Scott. They made this whatchamacallit graphic novel called The Golden Age, which if you haven't read The Golden Age, please do. It's awesome. I think it was done by John Ostrander. Very, very good. And at any rate, there's this great bit in there with Alan Scott, who's the Golden Age Green Lantern, where he has the ring in a safe because he saw Hiroshima and realizes it's nothing compared to the destruction the ring is capable of. And it scares him. And he hasn't been wearing it. And he takes it out and he's kind of just rolling it between his fingers and he's sort of thinking. And he goes downstairs for lunch and he's going to ask the cashier in the jewelry store downstairs out to lunch. And the sports master robs the jewelry store. And so Alan Scott walks in and sports master knows he's Green Lantern at this point because this is like 1946. The war is over. And I guess his secret identity was blown or something in this universe. And so he kind of says, big man with a power ring, you're going to beat me up. And if, for those unfamiliar, Sportsmaster is kind of like an evil Casey Jones from Turtles.
Right.
And at any rate, Alan Scott calmly sets the ring on the counter and says, I don't need a ring to kick your ass. And he just goes over bare-fisted because Alan Scott played football in the era before pads were invented. And he just beats the absolute shit out of the Sportsmaster. Hard.
Good.
And like it's visceral. And Sportsmaster's like hitting him with ball bats and stuff, and he just grabs him and snaps him and punches him in the face. It's just awesome, right? And that moment sold me. I'm like, this is my favorite Green Lantern of all time. Holy crap, And so at any rate, it was my birthday one year, and I got a friend who he passed away. He's not with us anymore. But he came up with this idea that on your birthday, you get to request a game that is maybe not everybody's cup of tea, but they got to play it anyways and humor you because it's your birthday. So I was stuck on this thing with characters like Spider-Ham, where I'm like, how does Spider-Ham exist?
Peter Porker, the spectacular Spider-Ham, yeah.
So I'm like, is he a toon like from Roger Rabbit, or is he more like the Ninja Turtles, where the Ninja Turtles would be like a live action kind of thing, And we aired on the side that Spider-Ham was a toon, like Captain Carrot and the Zoo Crew, right? And so we're like, well, we kind of need to have an episode that establishes toons. And I said, well, because by the way, my day job is I'm an art teacher and I teach animation. Cool. But at any rate, so I'm like, what set me on that path was literally the movie Roger Rabbit. Let's do a Roger Rabbit game. Let's do just literally the superheroes go into the movie Roger Rabbit, blah, 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 blah. And we established that the toons are something else. I said that Mxyzptlk was kind of to blame, But at any rate, so we start running this innocent game in Toontown, and one of the weasels has a ball bat. And he hits Alan Scott over the head with it. And if you're familiar with Alan Scott, he has a weakness to wood.
Yes.
Right? And just the weasel rolls a critical success. And we're like, wait, hold on. Like, that's his weakness. And we look at it, and I was like, hold on. Let's put the movie in. Is it a cartoon baseball bat? Because that means it's made of ink and paint and shit like that. Or is it a wooden baseball bat? And sure enough, when they filmed it, they were floating a wooden baseball bat around on wires. And I was like, oh, my God, we killed Alan Scott, and it was a fucking weasel. Right? Like, it's just this stupid, you know what I mean? And by the way, if I was doing DC movies, that's not how I would do Alan Scott. He's like my favorite Green Lantern of all. So that said, not all the games are winners. Sometimes weird stuff happens, but I feel like I'm just documenting what happened, But I feel like the good times are really good. I got like a record number of likes on a story called The Celtic Guardian. So if you go through my stuff and you see stuff called The Celtic Guardian, I would start there. I feel like that's some of the best stuff we've ever done. My favorite game of all time, by the way, is I won't say I'm friends with him, but I'm acquaintances with Corey Burton, who is the voice of Brainiac on Superman the Animated Series. So I wrote him online. He has a website, and his thing, he like collects old radios and stuff, and he likes questions about audio stuff and blah, blah, blah. And at any rate, I wrote him, and I said, so I got this game, and and it would mean a lot to me if you played Brainiac. And he said, sure, I'll do that. And I was like, this is so cool. And I said, what do you want to do, man? What do you want to do? And he's like, have you ever seen an old movie called Colossus, the Forbin Project? And I said, no. And he said, I want to rip off the plot of that movie. That's what I would do if I was Brainiac. So I watched the movie, and the gist is Brainiac takes control of the world's nukes. And if you leave your house, he nukes a small town in a random country and says, get back in your house. Wow. And I was like, holy cow, this is a problem. And so I presented it to my players, and nobody had a solution. And I was like, did Brainiac just win? Like, there's not supposed to be a winner in role-playing games. Corey Burton just effortlessly freaking won, right? And we didn't know what to do. And about a year ago, they had a convention. Actually, ironically, it's where that train derailed in Ohio.
Yes.
West Salem, Ohio, or whatever. At any rate, the train derailed there. There was a convention there last year that someone just mentioned, a dirt mall convention. That reminded me. It was in an old junior high building. But they had the Flash. They had John Wesley's ship from the 1990 Flash series, right? And I
have that whole
that
series
show.
on DVD, yeah.
Big fan. And like, mind you, when we were starting the game in 85, not that long later as 1990, our Barry was for sure described as like kind of the John Wesley ship Barry, right?
I dig it, yeah.
And so at any rate, we go to this convention, and there's people in front of me in line, and I say, you can go in front of me. You can go in front of me. You can go in front of me. And he was signing autographs from like 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock. And I intentionally went to the back of the line because I didn't want anybody behind me to get mad. Yeah. And so I'm the last person, and I get up to meet him. And ironically, the story earlier about my vision closing in, it happened again when I met him. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I think I'm going to pass out. And he's like, you know what? That's fine, because that's going to pass in 3, 2, 1. And for whatever reason, that worked. And I was like calm, and I said, okay. And I set the box set down to DC Heroes First Edition. I said, I don't know if you know what this is, but this is DC Heroes. And right here is a picture of the Flash. And I would love it if you would play in our game. And he's like, sure. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but sure, you know? And I'm like, so here's the scenario, sir. Do you know who Brainiac is? And he's like, no. And I said, Brainiac is kind of like a Terminator. He gives Superman a hard time. Da, 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 da. He's like, okay, got it. And I said, he's got control of all the world's nukes. What do you do? And he goes, that's a really interesting question. Nobody's ever asked me anything like this before. And he goes, does super speed help me? And he starts asking me questions about the game mechanics of super speed.
The game. Yeah.
And I say, you can substitute super speed for the amount of time it takes to figure something out. And he says, okay, I would like to do that for how long it takes to write antivirus software against Brainiac. And I was like,
oh that's brilliant!
And I literally hand him a red and yellow D10, and he rolls them, and we got pictures of it, and he rolls like a 9 out of 10 or whatever, which is awesome. That's what you want. And I said, that's great. It works. There's this thing called the 15 rule, which means anything over 15 works. It works. you stop Brainiac. He no longer has control of all the nukes. You know, da 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 da. And he's like, okay, cool. You know, and so I got John Wesley Shipp to play the Flash in my game. And I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest game I've ever
That's
ran.
freaking phenomenal. That is awesome.
So, and then I got him to sign the GM screen. And you showed a picture earlier, right?
Screen.
Okay, so it's a gigantic full moon, right?
Yeah.
And he says, where do you want me to sign it? What do you want me to do? And I said, you know how in the Flash pilot they showed the full moon with the lightning bolt in front of it?
Yes.
To make the symbol, kind of like the bat wing went up and made the symbol in front of the full moon, you know, right? And he goes, yeah. And I said, I would love it if you put a little lightning bolt on that full moon. And he did. And so that's the first signature I have. I got to start going to conventions now to get. And I'm like, oh, God, I got John Wesley Shipp as the Flash. I need to get everybody else. Yeah. And I don't know who to get. And so this fall at that same convention is going to be Dean Cain. And so I'm thinking about going to that convention. And by the way, if anybody in the chat has suggestions for what I should actually say to him, what I'm leaning towards right now is, okay, you're Superman. It's your day off. What do you do? You know, what do you do when there's no crime? What does Superman do? And let him have some fun with it, you know. But, if you guys hit me with either on my channel, this channel, whatever, I don't care. Facebook, Twitter, it's all good. Let me know what you think I should ask Dean Cain. But yeah, Dean Cain's going to be there, and I think I'm going to get his signature as the first Superman. What really, really sucks is last October or something at the Columbus Con that I was going to go to, the guest of honor was Kevin Conroy. And I was this close. You know what's weird about that is, like, I don't know how to put this, but like Kevin Conroy was going to be there. Jason David Frank, who was the Green Power Ranger, which I was kind of old enough. That wasn't really my thing. I was babysitting my younger cousins and they watched it. So I was kind of watching it in a way. Yeah. But like, it's weird how many of the guests that were supposed to be there last Halloween passed away, like right before Halloween. Like, it's really, really weird. But yeah, I'm really upset that I was this close to Kevin Conroy signing the GM screen. I got to kind of.
It comes down to, folks, just keep in mind that none of us, no matter how famous, how rich, or how poor and unknown you are, none of us is guaranteed another day. If you have an opportunity to meet someone that you really want to meet, do not pass that opportunity, because you don't know if you will ever get that opportunity again. That's really key. And you know what? I have really enjoyed the past 2.5 hours of stories from Chris Kent. If you have too, you need to subscribe to his channel. He is going to continue to, there's already a lot of content there, but he is going to continue to share the stories of his very long-term role-playing game. So, in
fact, on my channel next Thursday.
That's right. Come back next Thursday to Netter's Network. You know, this beautiful woman right over here, who's actually sitting right across from me here. She will be interviewing Chris Kent even further.
More stories.
More stories, absolutely. More stories. So absolutely.
I've been very blessed. Part of it is I'm mischievous, and so throughout my life I've gone out of my way to do things like tackle Lou Ferrigno. So like I have a lot of stories. I don't know what we're going to talk about on Netter's channel, but yeah, I've got a lot of stories.
Absolutely. So, you know, make sure that you're subscribed to Chris Kent, and get caught up because he's got a great story there in the role-playing game. He inspires me a great deal, and I think I'm going to kind of shift what I'm doing with this whole... Oh, and by the way, in the chat, excuse me, in the description below, I have a link to the MeWe group where Sir Torrin Clegane and many others have contributed to this thought experiment of how we would, in an alternate universe, design the DC cinematic universe if we had control over it. Subscribe, join MeWe, join the group. You can contribute. But I think what I'm going to do going forward is I'm going to start making videos where I just kind of, through narration, kind of dramatize the different things that I would do. How I would rework Smallville, how I would spin it up to the large screen, what other shows I would do, what other movies I would do. I've seen some other channels doing something similar, and I think it could be a lot of fun. So that's what I have planned for this little project going forward. Chris, do you have anything coming up in the near future you want to give us a little sneaky peek of?
I've been thinking about this a lot. That I heard what you guys were saying to other people. I got to be honest with you. No.
Okay, that's fine. You're just going to keep putting out the videos.
You know what?
Well, there's that.
Let me give you a quick example. I saw the new Guardians of the Galaxy last night. I wasn't really a fan, so that made me think, well, maybe I should run some games that kind of deals with similar things. Like maybe I should do a thing with like the High Evolutionary, but this is what I would do with the High Evolution. But it's a reaction to something I saw, right? So it's like it changes.
I dig it. I hear you.
That's
good stuff.
From moment to moment, I just try to make the best choices I can.
Yep.
I was just going to say, at the end of the day, I'm an artist. Yeah. That sounds a little pretentious. I don't mean for it to be, but I feel like I'm an artist.
It is.
And I see my game as a form of sculpture. But instead of working in like clay or marble or whatever, I work with concepts and I work with the imagination. And I describe things that I think are interesting and that I hope that the listener will think is interesting, And also I'm a very open guy. If you write me and say something like, you know what, I would love to see you do X-Men. I've been thinking about that a lot recently. Like I was like, I would love to just really dig in and do an X-Men series.
Yeah.
But at any rate, because I use the DC rules, but I don't always do the DC universe. I do DC and Marvel both, But it just kind of, I see what seems like a good idea at the time.
Yeah.
And right now, I never think too far down the line. I live in the present.
I dig it. I played both games. I had the DC role-playing game and the Marvel game. The Marvel was very much more like, at the time, Dungeons and Dragons. So it was a rule set that I was more easily able to follow. The DC rule set with all the APs, the aptitude points and stuff, and the scaling, it messed up my head. I had a real hard time with it, but I collected all of the modules and stuff and all the source books and whatnot. So I've got all of that kind of stuff. But
that's interesting you say that. That's interesting you say that because something I've noticed over the years, because again, we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of the game. I've wasted 40 years of my life on this.
It wasn't a waste if you enjoyed it. It wasn't a waste if you enjoyed it.
But at any rate, the secret is a lot of the guys who worked on Marvel went to DC, right? Yeah. And the weird thing is they're secretly the same game. I could actually show you. Yeah, if you line it up to like feeble equals 0 APs, core equals 1 AP, typical equals 2 APs. They are the same game. I can actually run Marvel. I've done this already where people will use the Marvel character sheets, and I will say, okay, your dexterity of feeble versus his dexterity of excellent means you need to give me a 15 or better to land a hit.
Interesting. I did not even realize that.
And yeah, it's the same people worked on both games. I could go off on huge tangents about. I love the DC system because it says things really quick. Like Batman with a strength of 5 can pick up a rock that weighs 2 APs and throw it a distance of 3. Yeah. And not many role-playing games allow for that. And so that means combat and stuff is really fast. And I love that because I am very story-oriented and I don't care at all about math. Yeah. But
I have a great
I was just going to last thing was I was just going to say, if any of you guys want to play online, I've been thinking about doing that. If you guys want to play, let me know. We'll set aside a time and we'll do it on Skype or something, and I'll let you play in the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth.
That would actually be pretty damn awesome. I would love to do that, and you totally have my permission if you want to OBS it, record it, turn it into a video for your channel. That would be kind of cool too. But I actually. So my role-playing experience in the DC universe was I created a character called Pegasus, and the concept we kind of broke the rules. We kind of set him at a higher level because he was a combination Superman Batman. If you ever saw the Elseworld speeding bullet, the idea of
I love it.
So you know the idea. This was an idea of a wealthy socialite type character like Bruce Wayne, who has access to all the technology and whatnot, but he ends up receiving these mental powers, these telekinesis and stuff that allows him to mimic the abilities of Superman. So it was more role-playing than anything else. We didn't really get bogged down in the rules any more than if you were playing a role-playing game as Superman, that level. But I got the role-playing of Batman-ish Bruce Wayne type of stuff. But that was actually pretty cool. I would love to get back into that. So yeah, let's talk about that on offline sometime real quick. Let me, as we wind down the show, and of course, again, one more time, everyone, please make sure you're subscribed to Chris. Check out his channel. But then next week, Thursday, he will be a guest on Netter's Network, and he'll continue this conversation there. But tomorrow night, Netter and I will be over on Big Al Presents. I'm not dropping any links tonight, guys. Hopefully you guys have been subscribing to all the links that Deleted Scenes has been dropping. Make sure you hit those notification bells. Tomorrow night, I will be over on Big Al Presents with Netter's Network. We will be doing a watch party of I believe that's 1981 classic film, Heavy Metal. And again, I love
Heavy Metal.
Isn't it great? I will be hosting the film on Cosme, so come to the link, right-click at the top of the chat. We will have the Cosme link, so you can watch along with us. We'll be doing our commentary. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I love that film. I will probably dig in a little bit into the parallels between the one segment of Heavy Metal and The Fifth Element. We'll talk about that tomorrow night on Presents.
Can I say something as a art teacher real quick?
Yeah.
I love that the Heavy Metal movie is why we got the He-Man cartoon. They were both rotoscoped. They both hired Playboy Playmates and bodybuilders I can't watch heavy metal without thinking of He-Man. And like, what if we mix the two? And like, I really want the mixture of the two with like R-rated Tila. But go ahead.
Damn, man, I like how you think. Yeah, no, rotoscoping is a missed art form. If you think about the Fleischer Superman, if you think about the what was it, the Lord of the Rings cartoon, I think that was Bashki.
What? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, also, if you, I'm so sorry. I'm just overwhelmed by enthusiasm. Fire and Ice. If you guys have never seen Fire and Ice, my God, that's like sort of required viewing for my class.
I agree. That is some brilliant stuff. Yeah. So, but yeah, tomorrow night, Big Al presents Heavy Metal. I will be hosting the film off platform, so definitely come join us. Sunday night on Deleted Scenes. Remind me of the time, Steven. That's I want to say 7:30 or something like that. Anyway, what's important is his is the classic lead in to
7 Central, 8 Eastern, I think. Yeah.
7 Central, 8 Eastern. He will be talking about switching channels. Check it out. It'll be an interesting lead in to Geeky Geezers at 8 Central, 9 Eastern on Age of Booners channel, where we've got a whole host of articles lined up to bring you your geeky news for the week. Much of which might be already covered by some of your favorite YouTube channels. Some of them probably not.
Writer's strike.
The writer's strike and so forth. We will probably bring a very different perspective than some of your other favorite YouTube channels. Definitely worth checking out on Sunday. Boomer, what do we have Monday through Wednesday? Do you know of anything?
Nothing off the top of my head. I might be doing a stream with Birdman on Wednesday, so keep an eye on his channel. But we're still trying to iron out the details of that.
Yeah. Okay.
And then that Thursday brings us to Netter, right?
Absolutely. Thursday, as I mentioned a couple times during the stream, this guy right here will be over on her channel.
Yay!
Exactly. Where he will continue this conversation on her channel. That is 9 Central, 10 Eastern on Netter's Network. So make sure you're subscribed to her. That's Thursday. Friday, that brings us around to next Friday. Back here, my guests, we'll have 2 guests. Married couple, Cannoli Sasquatch and Mrs. Cannoli Sasquatch. Netter and I will be having a double date with them, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. So that's the week in review, folks. Chris, any last words before we end?
I don't know. I'll see you on Netter's Network, I guess.
There you go. That's absolutely fair. Age of Boomer, last words?
Nothing. This was a fun stream, and thank you for joining us, Chris.
Absolutely.
There were some great stories. I like the Lou Ferrigno story. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Great stuff. And Netter of Netter's Network, she's getting up to come to the mic.
So I don't sound like I'm a million miles away.
Yeah, absolutely. Last words, Netter.
Well, you know what I always say.
I do.
Those of you who are here frequently. We can talk amongst ourselves, and that's all well, good, and fun. But it's so much more fun when you guys are joining us in the chat. You're dropping your comments, your questions, your trivia, just acting goofy, whatever it may be. And it doesn't feel like we're separated by miles or continents in some cases. It feels like we're all just hanging out in the same room together, enjoying each other's company, having a great time. You're not just our friends. You're our family.
True.
We love you guys, and we appreciate you so very much for spending this time with us. And we will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Super appreciate every single one of you. Make sure you hit the like button on your way out. And hope to see you on the next one. Take care, everyone.
Good night, ladies.
Good night, sir.
Hit it, sweetheart.